The shocking reason I was denied entry to heaven. I began a slow journey through a dimly lit tunnel, moving towards a distant light. I saw two figures on the left side, with one being tall and familiar, though I couldn't see their features clearly. They were shadowy with a bright light shining behind them. I was told to stop and not go any further, as it was clear I had not yet completed everything needed. If you're interested in near-death experiences, consider subscribing and liking the video for more fascinating stories. Now, let's get to the story. My name is Don Stenson. Before this event, I was somewhat psychically sensitive, as my mother noted. From birth, I would tell her when people were coming before they arrived, and they would show up or call as I predicted. As a child, I often had out-of-body experiences but didn't understand them and didn't talk about them. My mother found these experiences strange and unsettling, so I suppressed them, which I believe led to them stopping. I have always had very clear and detailed dreams every night, which is rare. Throughout my life, I've also had many visions. While visions are not unusual among Native Americans, many people only hope to have one in their lifetime. I've had many, some of which became clear only after my near-death experience. I don't remember much before the surgery, except that I had been in chronic pain for over 3 years, which led to losing a job I loved. For most of those 3 years, I was bedridden with pain and depression, seeing many specialists to figure out what was wrong. Finally, after 3 years, it was discovered that I had a pelvic floor disorder caused by a pelvic mesh implant from a previous surgery. This type of mesh is often mentioned in news stories about lawsuits. The mesh and anchors needed to be removed, so surgery was scheduled for July 10, 2013. It was expected to be a 2-hour procedure with no restrictions afterward. I went to the hospital with my sister, who stayed with me the whole time. I don't remember much before the surgery but woke up to see my sister's face showing both love and fear. She told me I was in the intensive care unit. I ended up having 2 major surgeries within 5 days. I'm not sure which surgery involved my near-death experience, but I'll describe what happened in the hospital and then the near-death experience. My sister said she had to watch me slip away more than once that night. The 2-hour surgery took much longer, and the surgeon managed to remove the largest single piece of mesh of their career and also removed the bone and anchors. Something went wrong during the surgery, causing my blood pressure to drop dangerously low. My sister described it as a scene from Grey's Anatomy, with doctors rushing around and yelling code blue. They were worried I might go into renal failure. I was in the ICU for many hours. Once I was stable, I was moved to another room and eventually released later that day. I was at home for 5 days. On July 15th, I suddenly felt severe abdominal pain while alone as my husband was out getting my pain medication. The pain was so intense that I struggled to reach my bed and couldn't think clearly enough to find my cell phone. I heard it ringing from my bedroom. It was my sister. I tried to explain my pain but could barely speak. She told me to hang up and call an ambulance, which I did. Next, I remember the paramedic standing over my bed and then carrying me out on a stretcher. The sky looked beautiful, but the pain was unbearable. I begged for relief and screamed in agony, desperately needing a catheter because I couldn't urinate. The ambulance took me to a hospital about 8 miles away. They gave me a catheter and did a CT scan. They discovered I had a painful bladder cramp and internal bleeding from the surgery, where they had accidentally cut the aorta. Since that hospital couldn't handle my case, they transferred me to another hospital across the Bay Bridge in the middle of the night. When I woke up, I was in surgery again. The surgeon explained that he had to fix a vein that was cut during the previous surgery. The medical team said I was very lucky to be alive. If I hadn't had the bladder cramp and called an ambulance, I might have fallen asleep and never woken up. I had been at home for 5 days with internal bleeding, and no one knew. As I recovered, I was struck by how everyone's staff, nurses, cleaners, assistants, and doctors kept saying how lucky I was to be alive. But I knew it wasn't luck, it was due to God's control and presence, a realization I hadn't understood before. During this time, I felt like I left my body peacefully and began a slow journey through a darkened tunnel towards a distant light. I saw the silhouettes of 2 figures: on the left a tall one, who was my grandfather, and a shorter one, who was my great-grandmother. They were shadowy with a bright light glowing behind them. I was told without words that I should not go further, as I was not ready and had not done enough good in my life. I needed to do more good and go back. As I descended, I was given a choice between two families, my own family on the left and a larger family on the right. After thinking it over, I chose to return to my own family. When I regained consciousness, I experienced a series of miracles not just for me but for those around me, including my dog and plants. I receive constant messages from God and have been blessed with special knowledge. I was informed that I would need one more surgery, scheduled for November 13th. After this surgery, my life is expected to become very busy. A miracle happened when my husband and I were driving to San Francisco to meet my sister and mother for lunch before my doctor's appointment. We arrived early, and after being in the car for an hour and a half, I was in a lot of pain and really needed to use the restroom. Since we had extra time and were near a hospital, I asked my husband to stop there so I could use their bathroom instead of a gas station. I got my walker from the truck and made my way into the hospital. It was a bit of a walk, but I managed to get there and use the restroom. When I came back outside, my husband wasn't there yet. I leaned against the wall with my walker and waited, but standing for more than a few minutes was very painful for me. The pain became so intense that I started to shake and felt dizzy. I knew I needed to sit down quickly, so I went back inside the hospital. The woman at the information desk saw I was in trouble and asked if I needed help. I said yes, and she offered me a wheelchair. Just as I was about to pass out from the pain, they got me into the wheelchair and wheeled me toward the emergency room ER. When we reached the ER, the nurse tried to get information from me, but I couldn't speak. I felt a sharp explosion in my chest. Suddenly, the left side of my face drooped, and I couldn't move my left arm or leg. I also couldn't speak. I had no identification with me because I was just using the restroom. My husband, mother, and sister were all worried and didn't know what had happened or where I was. The hospital staff quickly got me into a bed, but I still couldn't talk. The doctor realized I might have had a stroke and called in more doctors. They asked me many questions, which were hard to answer with only the right side of my mouth. I remember crying and repeating "Thank you, God" over and over. Despite the stroke, I felt calm, loved, and grateful. It was a blessing to have a stroke in one of the best hospitals. After many hours and tests, the doctors couldn't find anything wrong. My heart and brain were fine, and everything looked perfect. Since then, my life has changed a lot, and I have so much to share. I'm thinking about writing a book or starting a blog to share the messages I've received. Next, you might want to watch another near-death experience about a woman who recited a prayer used in Catholic exorcisms. It's an extraordinary story.